Hello, good afternoon. May peace be upon you. Today's lesson is very important, and we are talking about is information processing theory, which has originated from cognitivist orientation or paradigm of educational theories. What we are talking about is how memory system works, and that explains how we learn, as I'm going to tell you. Very simply speaking, there is information which a person is getting through his senses. That may be the ears, that may be the eyes, that may be the sensory parts, sensory receptors on the skin, and so on and so forth. It is encoded and there is retention of information over time. This information goes into the mind in a form of a code. It is called as encoding, and then that is retained in the mind over a time, which is the memory storage. It means the information is stored in the memory system. Now, when that information is needed, then by means of a process of retrieval, the information is retrieved. A person becomes aware of the information which was stored in memory, and it comes. If we see the brain as such, there are certain portions of brain which are very important with regard to memory system. Most important possibly out of them is hippocampus. Hippocampus helps us to store and remember information. It is like a library, and it tags our memories with information about what, about where and when they occur. So all the information in life which we get, it gets stored or retained in hippocampus. That is what science at present day tells us. Amygdala, which is present very near to hippocampus, it is a part of our threat system alerting us to danger. It does this by setting off an alarm in our body. By triggering the flight or flight response, it gets us ready to act. The problem is, unfortunately, it isn't very good at discriminating between real dangers out there and dangers that we are just thinking about. Interestingly, if you see amygdala, it is very near to hippocampus. Now the problem is, this thing is, when this flight or fight is initiated and triggered, the hippocampus does not function that optimally. It is difficult for the brain to register the information and store it and also retrieve it. It has an immense educational implication. If a student perceives teacher as a threat, it will hamper their learning. So therefore, while teaching, if the teacher is angry, his tone, body posture or language is threatening, if he's not showing love, he's not showing good association, a positive relationship, then that will hamper learning. Not only that, let us say teacher doesn't want to threat, teacher doesn't want to be aggressive, that is not his intention at all, but his communication skill is like that. He is perceived by the student as a threat, and again, learning would be hampered. Another important thing is, for the brain to function, which includes memory system, which includes hippocampus and senses and all other things, attention is mandatory. Attention is the mental energy which is required to move the information into brain to long-term memory. Without that, one cannot remember information, one cannot understand information, one cannot retrieve information. Hello students, be attentive, no multitasking, listen to this kindly video session, don't do other works along with it, and be attentive during the whole session. When I'm saying to you like that, or advising you like that, in fact what I'm talking about is about selective attention, because as you are sitting over here, you may not be doing multitasking, but your attention may be getting diverted by some noise or something, and you're trying to ignore that and focus on this video lesson. If you're doing multitasking, then obviously your attention is going to get diverted. So it's not good to do multitasking in that sense. And then we know this thing, that attention span is a limit of 14 to 15 seconds, and as gradually one proceeds, the attention becomes less and less. So therefore, the teacher should try again to reset the attention to the previous level, or the student should use strategies to maintain the attention. This is an interesting example I want to show you to understand memory system very simply. You see, this is a bottle. A bottle has a hole. Then this is the initial part of the bottle. Then this is the main part of the bottle. Consider the hole or opening of the bottle as sensory memory. Sensory memory is simple, is retaining of information. So the information which is registered in your senses or my senses like eyes, ear and other, that is called as sensory memory. From sensory memory, the information goes to short-term memory because the time for which it is retained in this part of memory is short. It's a short-term memory, and then from here it goes to long-term memory, which in fact we say the memory is retained. Then there is the concept of working memory. Working memory is the working bench in which information comes from sensory memory and a short-term memory into it. At the same time, information is also coming from the long-term memory, and on that, it's a working bench. The information needed for a person to work, that continues. Like when I am teaching you, information is coming to short-term memory into my working bench. My experience as a teacher in teaching, long-term memory is coming from there, and they're working together in the working bench, and that is translating into what I am speaking, what is my behavior, and so on and so forth. On this side, you see this water is flowing. Assume this is an information which is being given by the teacher. Now, this information has to be captured by the sensory memory. Then it had to be pushed into the short-term memory by means of a vehicle which is called as attention. Then from short-term memory, it has to move to long-term memory again by a vehicle which is called as attention. The problem is the information remains for half to 4 seconds and majority of information is lost. So whatever information you are getting at this point of time, which your eyes are registering, which your ears are registering, because these are the two which actually you are using at this time in the session, that memory in your sensory memory is going to disappear in this time or this time. Therefore, educational implication is do not cognitively overload the patient. Do not give a lot of information. Do not give information at a very rapid rate. Do not give an information which is so complex that the student is overwhelmed by it. So therefore, one has to take care of the cognitive load which is given to the student to learn. Then interesting in sensory memory, there is a certain mechanism which help to capture the information and put it to short-term memory. In long-term memory, patterns exist of different things. Now, if there is some information which matches this pattern, this information is immediately captured and goes. For example, if I have a car, Honda Civic, which is red color, and I am standing on the road and many cars are passing, but in my long-term memory, there is a pattern of red color Honda car, so therefore I can spot a red color Honda car without even putting a lot of attention and missing all other cars. This is an example of pattern recognition. Educational implication is teach in an organized way, give new information, keeping in mind pre-existing patterns in the student's mind, pre-existing schemas in the human mind. Another educational implication is, we know this sensory memory, this is a lot of restraint, information cannot go. Therefore, if we divide the information into small chunks, it's easier for these chunks to go to short-term memory. So therefore, educational implication is chunk the information in small units during teaching. Let's do an experiment. This is the information and I say you, okay, I'm giving you 30 seconds or 15 seconds. See this information. I'm giving you 15 seconds. Now I say you, okay, can you recall? Difficult for you. But let us say if I present the same information like this, again with 15 seconds, and ask you to recall, meaning by to retrieve the information from the long-term memory, it will be much easier. Because what I have done is, I have chunked the information into small chunks. Easy to remember. From sensory memory, the information gives it a short-term memory. But the problem is, information remains for 30 seconds in short-term memory. Therefore, within 30 seconds, if the information does not go to long-term memory, one tends to forget it. It just goes away. So education implication would be keep information in short-term memory for a longer time period. Because when you're going to keep the same information in short-term memory for an extended time period, more of it will go into long-term memory. And there are many mechanisms and strategies for that. Elaborative rehearsal, mnemonics, maintenance rehearsal, meaning by if you rehearse the information again and again and again, that will push the thing into long-term memory. If you think more on it, more are the chances it will go in long-term memory. Reading something, thinking, linking it with the previous knowledge, asking questions to yourself and giving answers to that. If there's a complex, then by you are trying to make it simpler for yourself, the more you do, more it will go. And for things which do not have concepts, using mnemonics like acronyms, rhymes, many methods, you can put the information in the long-term memory. All they do is, for a steady time period, the information remains in short-term memory and more goes into long-term memory. Imagery, mediation, maintenance rehearsal, as I was talking. Now, once the information goes and it is retained in long-term memory, then is the problem of retrieval. Information which cannot be retrieved to solve the problem, it does not make any sense. Because such information in the long-term memory may be stored, it remains useless. One way to retrieve is that while you are storing the family, you tag information with cues. That cues could be mnemonics, that could be activity, that could be patience. What you're doing is, in fact, when you are encoding the information, you are tagging your codes with the tag that is called as encoding specificity. So therefore, if memory is tagged with patience, activity and schemas, the cues are picture, event, activity, etc. So when a person gets a cue, that may be a patient, that may be an activity, that may be a picture, that may be anything, the whole memory comes back. For example, if there is a patient of X disease and you study the information as X disease on the patient, keeping patient in mind, the next time whenever you're going to see a patient of X disease, all the information will come to your mind because you have cued the information when it was being encoded with that patient's picture or your experience that day meeting with that student, so on and so forth. In fact, if we see the whole thing under the umbrella of cognitivism and its offshoot constructivism, that is cognitive constructivism, we construct our own knowledge, that is learner construct actively on the foundation of the previous knowledge. The previous knowledge, you add it with a new knowledge, and there is an integrated knowledge for problem solving. In order to do that, you have to use tools like learning by doing, reflective thinking, critical thinking, and metacognitive strategies. If you think of all these things, in fact, they're helping you to store the information from outside into long-term memory. Translating it very simply, there are encoding processes which take the information into long-term memory to be retained there. They include imagery. Whatever one is reading, one tends to make an image of it. A very important way of putting a thing into long-term memory. Mediation. If you're reading something which is complex and difficult, and then you're trying to simplify it by thinking in other ways, it tends to keep you in the long-term memory. Rehearsal. It could be simply repeating the same information again and again, which would be called as maintenance rehearsal, or thinking on that thing, on that information, and then increasing your depth of processing by asking question and answer, how this thing is happening, why this thing, what it is to link what I studied previously, and so on and so forth. Mnemonics we all know, activating prior knowledge, and metacognitive strategies. To retrieve the information, the techniques include encoding specificity. Remember what I was talking about. Tag the information with cues, and when the cues come, the information is retrieved. That is encoding specificity. Then simply recalling or recognition. I hope this helps you to understand information processing theory, which is an educational theory and learning theory. Have a good day. Continue smiling. See you again.